If you've been to one of my Getting Your Drive Organized sessions in the past, this one's going to be a little bit different. The constraints that we were put under for the IT camp or the Summer Learning Academy were a little different than what I would traditionally do. I just had to make it shorter. So I tried to clear it up a little bit, but some of the things that I might gloss over, I'm going to share a couple of things with you at the end that you might be able to look at for sort of next steps. So I'm going to provide you with 10 tips to sort of pick away at over maybe 10 or more days. So if you pick sort of one a day or one a week or one every time you kind of sit down and have a little bit of time, it's a really great way to sort of pick away at organizing your drive. Some of them will take a little bit longer, others would be quite short, but that's kind of what I'm hoping to provide you with today. So the point is, after today, is to find a starting point that works for you. You may not be interested or find relevant some of the things that I'm mentioning, but there might be some that you think would be a really big help for you. So these are just generic tips, and you can take away all or a few, but my hope is that next steps will be that you walk away with a way to have an organized drive. We can hope, right? So those are just a quick overview of the 10 tips. I'm not going to go over them right now because I'm actually going to go through them with you, but I thought it would be helpful when you're looking at the slide deck at another time. So a couple tips before we actually get started is that you really should always be using Chrome when you're working with your Google Drive, and especially with your GNSPES. I do know that some people prefer Safari if you're working on maybe on your Mac, or some people are diehard Firefox people. If you're an Internet Explorer person, I don't want to hear it because typically that is what causes the problem. If you're doing something and it's really wonky, it's not working. If you're not in Google, sometimes things just don't work together. So if you're trying to move things in your drive or do stuff and it's just not working out, I would really make sure that you're always using Chrome. It's going to get you started sort of on the right foot. If you are using Chrome or a Chromebook, you should always check for updates, because sometimes you'll see a little green arrow either in the top right of your browser, or if you're on the bottom right of your Chromebook, it just means that it needs an update. It's going to restart the Chrome browser, which is really annoying when you're signed into your GNSPES and you have like 100 tabs open, but trust me, it really is for the best. So if you're looking right now at your Chrome browser and you see that up arrow, don't do it now, but I would highly suggest taking a minute to do that at some point today so that you know that things are going to work well for you. Also, make sure you're logged in with your GNSPES ID, not your personal Gmail. Now, granted, a lot of these tips will work for your personal Gmail. Some of the things are a little bit different, but if you're having trouble kind of figuring out where stuff is, why it doesn't look the same, problem is probably that you're not logged in with your GNSPES ID, that you're logged in somewhere with a personal account. And up in the top right-hand corner, you're going to be able to switch back and forth. So as we're going through this presentation, I'm going to keep the presentation open, but I'm going to pop back and forth into my Google Drive so that you can see how some of this stuff works in real time, because you can't really take a snapshot of an action. So tip number one is decide on your view, list or grid. So whether you want to have list view or you want to have grid view. The nice thing is that you can switch back and forth whenever you want, but it really helps if you kind of pick a view and sort of stick with it, because you'll get used to manipulating your drive in one way or the other. You just kind of have to figure out which one works best for you. So list view looks more like the traditional Windows Explorer. It also more easily allows you to see details. So when it was last accessed, who it was accessed by, last opened. The grid view is more for identifying documents based on what they look like. So on this next slide here, you're going to see list view is on the left, grid view is on the right. So you can see on the left-hand screen, I've got it organized by last opened. So you'll notice there a lot of the things that I kind of opened up here. I can see who the owner is. It gives me a little bit more information on what's in my drive. It looks more like the traditional Windows Explorer version that you would see put into your Google Drive. But grid view also is loved by a lot of people because you can quickly go through and see what's in your drive, what it looks like. Maybe you have 4 or 5 different documents with similar names in the same folder. It does make it easier for you to quickly pick the one that you're looking for based on that tiny little snapshot that's there. And you'll see at the bottom beneath list view and grid view, there's a little button there, and that's the button to press for list view, and that's the button to press for grid view. And you'll see those are up in the top right-hand corner. So underneath, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not. I'm going to assume that you cannot. Just going to hop out of that here. So up here in the top right, you'll see that you can easily switch between list view. You can see these pictures that I planted, and your grid view. So you can swap back and forth between there. Like I said, you can flip back at any time. It does apply though to all of your subfolders and all of your folders. So you can't have one part of your drive in list view and the rest in grid view. If you're the owner of all of that stuff, you kind of have to pick one and it applies to it all. So that will help you to be organized because you'll know what to expect and how to look. And I prefer the list view because I want to choose how it's ordered, and it's much easier to do that in the list view. So that's tip 1. Tip 2 is to create folders and subfolders. Now, what happened was back 4 or 5 years ago, however long ago it was that we created our GNS PES accounts and started using them on a more regular basis, is that some people dove right in and some people kind of held off because they didn't want to. But a couple of years ago, with the elimination of those home drives or the personal drives on teacher computers, everyone was forced to take everything they had on that H drive and dump it into their Google Drive. And a lot of what that created was a mess, to be honest. And you might not have things in folders. So creating folders, while it might seem like something super simple, the more folders and subfolders that you have, the easier it's going to be for you to find items within your drive. So I suggest that you kind of come up with a few main topics of folders for your opening Google Drive page, so for your main drive, broken into larger kind of topics. So like you can see here as an example, I've got a personal, a teaching, an administrative, and old documents. You might even want to throw like a miscellaneous one in there. So for something that doesn't really relate to teaching, it's not totally personal, you can chuck it into your miscellaneous. If you've got administrative documents, like maybe you were doing your master's course and you've got all that other stuff, that could go in there. Your PGPs and your valuations, that would be a spot for that. Your teaching folder would obviously be for your teaching stuff or stuff related to your assignment, your position. And your personal stuff is a great way because there's unlimited space in a Google Drive. So it's excellent that you've got the ability to put a ton of stuff in there. So anything you want to keep separate from your work stuff, obviously if it's something that you should have on there, you could just toss that into your personal drive. So inside those is kind of where you want to put the meat and potatoes and kind of create your subfolders. So that's going to be the stuff that's more specific. Do I have that on the next one? Nope. I'll get to that later. But so within there with your subfolders, you'll want to just click new and then folder. I'm going to hop back out again into my Drive PD. So as you can see here, I just kind of did the ones that I used for an example on the slide deck there. But if I go into my teaching files, here's kind of a way that you can subdivide or subfolders within your actual folders. Now, this might sound like something that, depending on how much stuff you have in your drive, might be take an overwhelming amount of time. But if you just kind of start doing it moving forward, and then now and then kind of move stuff in as you come across it, you'll find that it's really easy to start organizing as you go. No one wants to sit down for an hour and just create folders and move stuff around. But sort of every time you open up something and feel like, no, this actually should be in its own folder, just take a minute and do it. So here you can see I've got like 2021. I can put stuff in there, and then I've got one that says old classes. That way, again, I don't have, if I've been teaching for 14 years, I don't have 14 folders as soon as I go in here. When chances are when I come into my teaching files, what I'm going to want is my 2021 folder. So then in old classes, I'd gone to new and created new for all those previous year's things. You can dump them in there. So you save them because your Google Drive has unlimited storage. There's no real need to delete much. But you can save everything that you need within those. And again, if you wanted to create a new one, you just click new and then folder. And then from here, I'm going to do 2016, 2017. So I'm just going to keep it organized. And there, I've got all those different folders there that are needed, and then stuff sort of gets nested within there. So the more folders you can kind of create, so only having a couple in the very beginning and then kind of subfolder as you go will help your stuff sort of stay nice and nestled in its own personal spot. So the next tip that I have is to color code your files. So this is a tip that not a lot of people realized. I know that it's kind of becoming more popular now, but it really helps, especially if you have lots and lots of folders, to color code. You don't have to color code them all. What I suggest that you do is color code the important ones, the ones that you want to draw your eye to. So if you just right click on a folder and select change color, you have, I think there's like 16 or something colors to choose from, which is really great. And you want to pick ones that will bring your eye to that folder. So if they end up kind of up and down, but you're always going into a specific folder, it helps sort of to jump your eye. What you can also do if you want to start remembering what color that folder is you can also color code all of the folders within that folder as the same color. So I'm going to give you an example there so that you can see it in action. So if I'm going to do my teaching files. Maybe I want to make this one, I'm going to go down to change color. I'm going to make this one blue. So you can see the folder changed color. Now I can go into my teaching files Maybe I want to also make these blue. I'm going to click and drag to select them, or you can click on one and then click on the bottom one and press shift. It's just a different way to select. Right click, change color. Now these are blue. So that kind of everything that I've got within here, all is a blue folder, makes it easier for me to remember that all of my teaching file folders are blue. As I make one as I go, I just remember to change it to that same color. The other thing that I suggest that you do, and this is on the slide here as well, leave the folders you don't use very often as gray, because remember, we're trying to draw our eye to the ones we use. We kind of want to leave aside the ones we maybe don't use very often. But one of the things I highly suggest you do is you change the classroom folder in your drive. Just notice I missed the quotation, to red, as in stop, don't touch me, don't really do anything with me. So if I do that, so the classroom folder, if you're using Google Classroom, you may or may not know that all of those files from Google Classroom are automatically generated within your drive to a folder called Classroom. You may have deleted it, you might have changed the name, and if you have, it's not too late to fix it. But if you've seen it there and just kind of wondered what it was, you really shouldn't put anything in it. You shouldn't change its name, you shouldn't delete it, because it's automatically where all the files go from Google Drive. So what I suggest that you do is you right click and you change that color to red, as in stop, don't go. And that way you kind of know, like, oh yeah, red, I'm not supposed to touch that one. I should leave that be, that's why it's red. And then it just might remind you to not do that sort of as you go. And yes, Chris made a good point that's there, that folder colors. Oh, yes, thank you for answering that question. All right, I got thrown off here. So that is color coding your files. So tip number 4 is to find and delete unused files. So one of the quickest ways to do this is in your search bar, type the word untitled. And we all know we never want our students to do this, but sometimes we're the worst offenders, and by sometimes we, I mean me. I have a ton of documents that are called untitled documents that I don't need. And if I were to uncrop this picture of my own drive where I searched untitled, it goes down really far, which is really embarrassing because here I am telling you not to do that. But what you can do is you can find all those documents that are titled untitled documents. If it should have a title, open it up and give it a title that's appropriate. We'll talk about that in just a minute as well. But if it's just a blank one that you opened up and didn't realize that you need, or you started to type notes in it and you moved to a different, maybe you decided a Google Sheet is better, then just delete it. That way you don't have all that stuff taking up space in your drive. And by space, I don't mean like the actual size. I mean just taking up room in places that you don't need it there, so that you're not opening them, wondering what they are later on. So if you have some time, you can search deleted. Search untitled, and then you can either delete it, rename it, and or move it to the appropriate folders. You can also search for zip files, and also you can also search for copy, because sometimes we make copies of things that we don't need, and it should be renamed. So you can do the same thing at the top if you type untitled. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna show you. So if I go here to untitled, you're gonna see there's a lot here, and probably all of these could be deleted. I guess most of them are here that I'm using for example. There's also, if I type copy, I can see here there's copy of lots of stuff that maybe I don't need that I made a copy of. So it's a good way to just kind of clean up the excess stuff within your drive that you might not necessarily need. It's always good to own your embarrassment too. So tip number 5 is to move your files into folders. So this is really easy if you pick away at it slowly. I would never recommend sitting down and deciding like, okay, so for today I'm doing tip 5, I'm going to move all of my files into folders, because it can be a really long process. What I suggest is that if you're doing something and you need a brain break, maybe you're reading an article, or you're reading a book, or you're working really hard on a presentation or a lesson, and you just need to do something mindless for 5 or 10 minutes, open up your main page of your Google Drive and try to start filing things away into proper folders. It's a nice chance for you to go through and actually see what you have in your drive, find things that maybe are relevant and you forgot you had them, or maybe irrelevant and you can delete them. But it's easy if you slowly pick away at it. Grid view also helps so that you can see the items as you're moving them. So I'm going to show you how you can do this. So if I go into grid view, because this is why I added in pictures, because maybe I'm not quite sure. So clearly here, this copy of untitled is blank. So it's not something that I would need. So I can just either press the delete button on my keyboard, or I can right click on it and go to remove. You'll notice that Google doesn't call it delete or send it to the trash bin because it's really unnecessary to delete everything. You can click remove, or you can just click and drag over here to your trash, and that will go away. But maybe I realized that my copy of whatever this is with pizza is really important. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to rename it pizza, something that's a bit more relevant. And maybe this is actually supposed to go in my teaching files from a different year. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. I can right click on it and go to move to. So if you're used to working within Windows, copy and paste, Control C, Control V was always the easiest way to move files from one place to another. But that doesn't work in Google Drive because it wants you to move. We're not copying and pasting anything. You're going to move stuff. So there's a few ways to do that, of course, because it's Google. They want to give you lots of ways to do things. So you're going to click move to. And from here, you're going to decide where it should go. So maybe I want that to go into my teaching files, and that should be in my 2021 because we're all going to learn about pizza. And I'm going to click move here. So if I do that and realize, oh, that's not where it goes, see this little pop up here. So I'm actually just going to undo that now so I can show you a different way to do that. Over here on the left, there's this little arrow next to my drive. If I click that, you'll notice that it gives me sort of a Windows Explorer version of all of my folders. I'm going to go here. I'm going to find the folder that I want it to go in by clicking these arrows. So I had said I wanted to get to all my teaching files and then into 2021. I can click and drag over here to the appropriate folder. So this I find is a good way to start getting rid of all that stuff that's in your main drive. If you pick a folder that you know you want stuff to go in. So first of all, I'm going to find all of the documents that I want to go into my 2020-2021 folder. I'm going to click them. You can hold down Control on your keyboard after you've clicked the first one. You can select all the things that should go in there, and then you can move them all into the right folder. So this is what I mean, how it's kind of brainless, but it's really important. So right now, I've just taken a couple of minutes to clean up a little bit of that main page, because the idea would be so that your main page really is just a couple of folders and everything sort of nestled in underneath if we're trying to stay organized. So that's a way to organize all of your files into folders. And this is one of the bigger ones. So like I said, remember, some of them will take, just a couple of minutes or super quick, like changing colors. Some of them you want to pick away at sort of over time as you go. So tip number 6 is to rename your folders and your files as you go. So this is one of the things that you can do literally every day, every time you're opening stuff in your Google Drive. Every time you open a document, regardless of whether it's your lesson for the day or it's something that you accessed from last year, figure out when you open it, is the name appropriate and is it in the right spot? And this is, again, a really good way to sort of pick away at it over time. Because if you find that your folder was just something that you threw together and wasn't really accurate, maybe rename it. So you just right click and go to rename. One of the other tips that I've started doing is when I was in the classroom, what I would do is every time I started a new year, I opened a new document, I would name it 01 before the actual title of whatever that thing was. And then as I went, the next time I checked to see, all right, the number there is 01. So the next one I'm opening is 02. I renamed it to start with 02, not the number 1 and the number 2. The 0 helps it stay in that numerical order. That way, when I come back the next year, I'm not left with a giant folder full of all of these files trying to figure out which one did I use first, which one did I use second, which one did I not use at all. I'm able to look at that folder now that I've gone through maybe that semester or that term to see, okay, these are the documents that I used, and this is the order that I used them in. So that the next time I teach that class, I already know, okay, so this document I used fourth, and I used this one before that, and I used this one near the end as a review. And it helps you to kind of stay organized as you go. So this is a great way to not have to sit down, but just make it a habit that every time you open a document, just kind of assess, does it have the right name? Is there a way I can make it a little bit more organized? And I think it's a fun thing to do here. It's not really a tip, but I think it makes it look kind of fun, is to add emojis to your main folders. You can easily do this. You can do it to your file names as well by right-clicking. Let's see, we'll do this one here. I'm going to add a picture to my classroom one. So I'm going to go to rename. And then I am going to, what am I doing here? I got to flip back. Sorry, there we go. Okay, rename. I guess I can't, how do I do it for my folder from here? Oh, this is always fun, isn't it? I'm just going to show you how to do it to a file, and then I'll come back on how to do it with a folder. So if I open up here, the puppies one, because who doesn't like puppies? So up here, I'm going to give it a better name. I'm going to go to Insert. Why did this work for me the other day? And of course, okay, I'm going to rename. We're going to come back to this one because for some reason, when I did this the other day, it worked fine, and now it's not working for me. So we're coming back to this tip. All right, tip number 7. Let's throw myself off here. So changing your drive settings. I'm not going to screen this one because I'm going to go right into my drive again. So there's 2 things that you can change in your drive settings that I think are going to be game changers. I tell people about these tips all the time, and I think that most people, when I mention this tip to them, it's something that they immediately go in and do. And you will have access to this document. It's going to be posted in the slide deck drive so that you can go back and look at this later. But there's 2 things that I think you should do. The first one is getting rid of the quick access, and the second one is making it so that your drive auto converts Microsoft Office documents. So if I go in to my drive, up here at the top is the settings cogwheel. So I'm going to go to my settings. And then there's 2 options here. So the first one here is the convert uploads. So if you tick this box, because if you went into yours right now and you've never checked the setting, it's not checked as default. It says convert uploaded files to Google Docs editor format. What this does is it doesn't apply to past documents. So it's not going to go through and make all of these changes in your drive to things that already exist. But it does mean that going forward, when you're going to either add new documents or drag and drop new documents to your drive, if it's a Word document, it automatically converts it to Google Docs. Because what happens on the default is that it keeps that Word document, but in order to open it and edit it, it converts it to a Google Doc. But then you're left with both versions in your Google Drive. And then what happens is maybe later on you go to look for it, you've got a Word document and a Google Doc, but they look the same. So maybe you accidentally click the Word document, it opens it up again, but then you have to end up making another copy and you end up with multiple versions in your folder. So if you tick this box, any PowerPoint, any Microsoft Word document, a Google or an Excel spreadsheet, it will automatically convert to the Google version of whatever that document is. If for whatever reason you do need a specific PowerPoint or a Word document to stay in that format, you can just come back into your settings, uncheck this box, click done, upload whatever documents you need to stay as those formats, then come back in and then tick the box again. Turn that back on. Just helps to create multiple versions of the same document in your drive, because the last thing you want is having to edit 3 different versions, and then obviously this then that you won't be able to keep yourself organized. And that's what we're trying to do here. The other option down here that I always suggest is this tick box here is to uncheck this box. So make relevant files handy when you need them in quick access. So quick access is that 4 document kind of quick access that you see on your main drive at the very top. And it doesn't often seem to have any rhyme or reason. You don't know where those files exist. It just usually is the last 4 that you've accessed. It's helpful if you're only ever accessing like 1 document, but I'm going to show you a better way to keep track of all the documents that you might use on a regular basis. So if you, like me, find that part to be kind of taking up too much space and sort of annoying and irrelevant, I would suggest that you uncheck that box, and then that will get rid of that little room of 4 documents at the top of your Google Drive screen. So again, that's just completely preference, but those 2 things I find really help for you to have a bit of a more organized drive. So that is
can I pause you for a second? Just
Please.
A couple questions that popped in here, and I just want to
Sure.
a couple. One, I can kind of help answer. The other ones, I'll defer to you. So just about your slideshow, and just all the slideshows, they will be up on the Summer Learning Academy website. So there's a short URL. I forget it offhand, but if you're on your Google landing page and there's an icon there for Summer Learning Academy, you can click on that. And there will be, once you get to the website, on the top, one of the tabs says slide decks or slides, presenter slides, something like that. And they might not all be up there yet, because I know some of us, after we present, we kind of find things that we got to fix and things like that. So we will be up there shortly after the Summer Learning Academy is over, along with the recordings. Now, there are a few other questions, and I might need some context on these. So Miriam asked, can we rename through Drive? And I don't...
Yes, so you can rename in your Drive or in the document itself. So, so if I'm in Google Drive, you can just right-click on the file and go down to rename, and that will allow you to give it a new name. Or if you're in a document itself, you can click up here and rename. So multiple ways to do that.
Okay.
So hopefully that answered that.
Okay, and there's a question, does it change the format of the doc?
It does, unfortunately. It really depends on what the document is. So I would say if it has any intricate tables, intricate layouts, or mathematical equations or scientific equations, sorry, no science brain here, lots of the like subscript and postscript, I would maybe caution against doing that automatically. But if it's just a regular document, whether it's a worksheet and has some tables or no tables, then typically it's pretty seamless. But if you have something that was incredibly intricate, then maybe you won't want to have it auto convert. But the thing is that if you're uploading a document automatically converts and you open it up and it didn't work, you can go in and untoggle that and then open up in its original format. It just might not, you might not be able to edit it that way.
Okay, thank you. We'll get a couple more here. Can you give versions of a file different names to preserve them?
Versions of a file. Yes, I believe so. So Tammy, I'm assuming you mean if you're in a document and then you go back to like see the revisions. So if I were to go here, last edit was yesterday. If I wanted to revert back to this version, you can, am I missing this, Mario? Where can I do that?
On the three dots.
Here we go. Yeah, so right here, I can give this version a name. I can also make a copy of that so that I have a version of the old version, and then I have the existing copy of the new version.
Okay, because what I have are 3 different versions of a presentation depending on my intended audience, like a PowerPoint.
All right, so do like 3 separate, like completely separate files?
Yeah. Yes.
So is it an actual PowerPoint?
Yes.
Because what happens sometimes too is if you click on it and convert it to a Google slide, it'll do that. But then if you do it again off your PowerPoint, it makes the exact same copy again of it. So every time you open up the PowerPoint and convert it, it makes a new copy of that. I don't know if that's what's happening or not.
Okay, thank you.
One more question here, Megan. If we move a file that's been shared, does that person who shared it have access to the new file I've created?
So I'm going to talk about that. It might actually be in my next tip. I think maybe it's tip number 9. Okay. I'm gonna address that, Lisa, in just a couple of minutes.
Well, that's Lisa first. She's always ahead of the curve and trying to.
And Lisa, if what I explain doesn't explain it, then just tell me to keep going with it, and I'll make sure that we get to that.
All right, thank you. All right, back to you. I'm going to mute myself, and you keep going ahead there.
Thank you, Mario. All right, so tip number 8, if you watched Mario's introductions or his teasers for IT Camp, I talked about this. I kind of gave this as a share when he asked me to talk a little bit about my session to kind of give one tip. And I wanted to put it as tip number 1, but it didn't make sense in that order. But starring your files is literally my favorite thing about Google Drive. I use it all of the time. I would be lost without it because while I preach organization, I don't always practice it. I try really hard to, but sometimes when I do have something organized, it's nested so well into like 8 different subfolders that if it was a document that I accessed daily or multiple times a day, I feel like I would waste years of my life just simply clicking into those folders. And I don't want that to be a hindrance, thinking like, well, I really like to be organized, but if I have to come in and every day click into 6 different folders to find, you know, my lesson plan that I do every day, that's kind of a pain in the butt. And I would completely agree with that. So starring is going to be your new best friend if you don't already use it. So what your starring your files does is it curates a bookmark or kind of creates a filter for your most important files that you use regularly at this moment in time. It's really handy for documents you might access all the time. So maybe duty schedules, or maybe your subplan, or maybe you're working on an assignment or a project that you're going to access sort of every day for the next couple of days or couple of weeks, but then later on you're not going to use it sort of at all. What you can do is add it to your starred. So what you do to add to a star is you either right click on it and go add to starred or remove from starred. So I'll show you here. So if I want to star my puppies document, because I'm going to work on it a lot over the next couple of days, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go to add to starred. So now that document, nothing happened. You didn't see anything happen, nothing changed on my screen. But now if I have that document open, go back to the main part of it. Just going to refresh it here. Work with me, there we go. You'll see now that this little gold star is a gold star. Before, it looked like this. It was a white star. So what I did there was just remove from my starred. So one of the things that I mentioned when Mario and I were chatting about this the other day is that when you do go into your starred section, you might see random files there because you did exactly this. Huh, what does this do? Oh, it turns it yellow. Oh, nothing seems to be changing. And then you moved on with your life, not even realizing what you had been doing was creating a filter or sort of a bookmark. So for documents that you use on a regular basis, you can start from here, or like I said, you can right click and either add to starred or remove from starred. But over here is the starred section. So if I click starred, I'm just going to switch my view here. These are all documents and folders. So you can start folders that I access on a regular basis. Now, I really do need to go through and clean this up a little bit because there's lots of things in here that I'm not accessing on a regular basis at this moment. But so now maybe I've got this, where's that puppies folder? So this is alphabetized by name. So here's that puppies document here. But if I had that in teaching files, 2020, 2021, unit 1, puppies, and I was going to access it every day, that would be a lot of clicks. But now all I have to do is click starred, go down to puppies, and here it is. Or for right now, I've got my own sort of IT camp schedule going on. This is nestled well within multiple folders because I don't really need to look at it most of the year, but I'll want to save it. But now it's just one click and I find it in my starred. But then you know what? When all of a sudden my puppies unit is done and I'm not going to be accessing this folder anymore or this file as often, I'm just going to remove it from starred. It does not in the slightest change where it lives, where it stays, where it's stored, what its name is, but it just it's like that one-click access. So this is, I find, really helpful because it allows me to stay organized. Like all these files you're seeing here, they have their own little space. If I hit this information button here, and I click on learning communities, I can go down here and see its location. It's not in the tips, however, but this information button here is always handy to go through and have a look at. I can see where it's located. So this is where it lives, but I can access it quickly because it's in my starred section. When I no longer need to look at this document anymore, I'll just right click on it and click remove from starred, and then it still lives in its folder, but I have a really quick way of finding it. So that would be adding things to your starred. And I think you'll find it really quick for, like I said, things for duty schedules, if you're working on something like maybe a holiday concert, all that stuff that's kind of using a lot right now, but next week maybe not so much. It's just nice to kind of have that rotating folder of files that you can quickly access. Tip number 9 is to clean up your shared with me section. See, I did insert some emojis here on my actual words here, but I refer to the shared with me section. Notice I don't call it a file. I call it file purgatory because it's where documents live while they're waiting for you to do something with them. So when someone shares something with you and it goes into your shared with me section, you really need to decide what your plan is for that file. If it's something that you're like, oh, that's nice, I quickly looked at it and that's it, I don't need to access it again, then there's really no action required on your part. But if it's something that you want to make sure that you have access to continually, either moving forward or you want to have your own version that you can edit, you want to make sure you take it out of there because there's really no way to organize or effectively clean up your shared with me folder. Some of you who might have been added to multiple Google Classrooms for the last couple of months have probably realized that your shared with me section has exploded because if you're in any Google Classrooms, any student document will pop up in there. If you've accessed a website where someone embedded a Google Doc and you put your mouse on it, it'll show up in your shared with me section. There's really no way to curate that. So what I suggest that you do is you take it out of purgatory, and there's 2 ways to do that. You need to decide whether you want to either make a copy or if you want to add a shortcut. And you have to figure out sort of what is your end game with this document? What do I want to do with it? And that is going to be what helps you decide between making a copy and adding a shortcut. So if you're going to make a copy, what this does is creates your own editable document. The time where you're going to want to do that is if you say like, hey, does anybody have any worksheets, maybe not worksheets, but any vocabulary lists or a beginning of the year plan or a parent document that they can share with me because they teach grade 2. And someone so kindly says, oh, I do, I'll share it with you. And so now it's in your shared with me section. And what you want to do is you want to make your own version because you want to put your own name on it and your own school on it and sort of edit it to have your own words, but you want to use theirs as a base. Then you want to make a copy. What this does is it creates a brand new version that you can edit, but it doesn't affect the original. It means that that person who shared that document with you isn't going to go back into it next September and then realize that you've changed all of their stuff. So think of make a copy like a digital photocopy. So you walk down the street or walk down the hall, they photocopy their stuff, they give you your copy. You go one way with yours, they go one way with theirs. So anything you do on theirs does not modify something when it's a copy. But sometimes that's not what you want. What you want is maybe a document, if you know it's going to be continually updated, like maybe an unassigned time schedule, or a document that you're like an agenda for a staff meeting that you know might continually change. What you want to do there is add a shortcut to your drive. What this does is it enables you to file it away into the correct subfolder so that you can be organized and keep it somewhere so you're not always staring at it when you don't need to. But it continually updates when somebody else who's collaborating on that document makes a change. The downfall, of course, is if that person deletes it, then it's gone from yours, but chances are if you were collaborating, then you don't need that anyway. But when you make a copy, if they delete the original, you still have your copy, and that's what's really important about that. So it's nice that as soon as you get that email that says so-and-so has shared a document with you, open it up and make that decision. Do I want to make a copy to edit myself? Or do I want to add it to my drive so I can access it later? So just to quickly kind of show you that, I go into my shared with me. So let's see here. I don't even know what half these things are, to be honest. I'm going to maybe do this one here. This was a document from Amber that we were working on it together. I know she's going to continue to update this, so I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to add a shortcut to my drive. I'm going to file it away where it's supposed to be. I don't actually need to do this because I don't need to keep it, but maybe it's going to go in here, in here, in here. I'm going to add the shortcut. It's still going to stay in my shared with me section, but remember, I'm pulling things out of here to make my own versions. But maybe here is a document that I don't, but maybe I want to have this 602 locker clean out as a template so that I can make my own. I'm going to right click and I want to make a copy. This is going to create my own version of this document. I can see exactly where it went into my drive, and here it is. Now I can see over here in the information that the owner is me. It's not shared with anybody. It's not connected to anybody else who may have been working on this previously. I have my own version. So if the owner of this original document finally decides to delete it because they don't need it, mine's not going to go anywhere because it's just on me. So before I go to the next, I can see the chat box is kind of going here. So before I go to that last couple of tips, I'm just going to pop in here. Okay, so Rima asked, when we modify a shared document and move, does the changes in move continue to be shared? So if you're modifying a shared document, yes, everything keeps going. Even if you move it, it will still continue to be shared. The only time that doesn't happen, Rima, is if you're moving something out of a shared drive. And if you try to do that, you will get a pop-up that says, are you sure you want to share this? Because all of the other people who usually have access will no longer have access. But if you're filing something away into a different section of your own drive, that person doesn't even get a notification that you've moved it. Hopefully that helps there. Okay, Abigail, should I delete all the unnecessary files out of my shared with me file? How do I get rid of the classrooms and the associated files that were added? So that's the thing with your shared with me, you can't really delete, you can delete it, but things are going to keep popping back up again because when you're in a classroom as a teacher, you have access to everything that those students create, every document that the other teachers put in there, they're all going to appear there. So that's kind of why I said that the shared with me section is not really a file that you can think of to sort of organize, rename, and do anything with. You really just have to decide what it is that you want in there and then take out and decide where you want to put it for the stuff that you want to keep, and just use the other stuff as white noise. Just kind of ignore what's in there. And Nisha asks, what does it really mean by a shortcut? Basically, you're just adding a quick link to your drive. So a way to access that document by clicking on something in your own drive instead of having to go into your shared drive and finding that. But it just allows you to file it away within your own drives. So hopefully that was helpful. Okay, we're getting through here. We're almost there. So that was tip number 9. Tip number 10 is finding your lost files. So before we even start organizing, that's not going to help you if you're trying to find something that you haven't yet gotten to organize. There's a really great way to find your lost files. And many of you have probably used the search feature that's in your Google Drive, but you might not have used some of the advanced features. So if you click the arrow, which I'll show you in a second, to use the search bar, there's way more options to help you refine your search. You can search by document type. So maybe you're trying to find something, you know it was a Google Sheet, but you have no idea what it was named. You can select by sheets. You can search by a keyword either in the title or anywhere in the document, which is really helpful if you kind of know a topic of what it was on, but you have no idea what it was named. Maybe it was named untitled document, guilty. You can search by date. Maybe you know that you used it last June because it was an end of the year thing, but you can't find it. You can search by documents in June. Search by owner. Maybe you know that, like, I know Mario shared it with me, but I don't know where it is. I can search by all the documents shared by Mario. The last time it was accessed, where it's located, and many more. So I'm going to show you that here. So you can type whatever you want into the search drive, but if you hit this down arrow, here are all your advanced search features that are really helpful for trying to find those things. Now, I will say, once you find it, probably good to figure out where it lives, give it a new name, and reorganize it. But this is a quick way to find it when you're looking for something. So here's where you can search for any type of document. You can filter it by owner. You don't have to even type a word into the search drive. You can just look at all of, if I want to see all of the presentations that I have, I can search that. And then this will just show all of the Google Docs, or sorry, Google Slides that are in my search. So you can add in as many or as little of the search terms as you want. So you can see shared with a certain person, has a certain words within it. So lots of different options here for you to find those files. And even maybe when you do file something away and you do a really good job, but you can't remember quite where you put it, this is a really great way to figure out where it is. And then once you find it, it'll show, you can click a button that shows you where it actually exists within your drive. So lots of different ways to find all those lost files. So that wasn't too bad, was it? Hopefully not too overwhelming. I probably could have given you 30 tips, but I tried to pick sort of the 10 most effective and easiest to access. So hopefully that was good. So a couple of things on where to go next. And yes, I'm not letting you go quite yet. Like I said, you will have access to this slide deck. I haven't put it up yet because I wanted to wait until I finished, in case I added some extra things. But there's lots of things, lots of places you can go on the internet to find out what to do next with your Google Drive or what to do more. That's how I learned, by simply just seeing what was out there. So what I did do is the first link I have there is called Air Integration. It's a girl who, she does all these sort of Google Drive tips, and actually Google tips. But what I did was, a couple weeks ago, I signed up for her Google Drive detox. And what she did was, over 2 weeks, she sent out 1 tip a day, kind of like my 10 tips thing. And some of them were the same, some of them were different. But it kind of gave you 1 a day. Here was the way to, here's one thing you can pick away at today. Here's one thing you can pick away at tomorrow. So I found that was helpful. The Google Training Center has a really great section for all the different Google apps on ways to get started from the very, very basics to some advanced things. Link is there. My previous Organize Your Google Drive PD has even more information on more along the lines of using your drive. So I've linked to that slide deck there as well, because you might want to have a peek at that, because it has a bit more context and a lot more information in it, because I wasn't quite as constrained and I wanted to make sure that I didn't veer off course. So I kind of redid this one to make it a bit different. So I would highly suggest you have a look at that as well. And then Shake Up Learning, there's 13 tips to organizing your drive. And then of course on the bottom, just Google it. Just Google Drive organization and see what pops up, and then figure out what works best for you and kind of what you see from there. What I'm going to ask that you do, if you don't mind, before we go, is if you can take just 1 minute. Let me just copy this. I'm going to paste it in the chat. If everyone doesn't mind just taking 1 minute to go, it's optional completely, of course, and just fill out a quick little bit of feedback just on my presentation. I'm always looking forward to hearing the good and the bad so that I know how to improve for next time. If you are from the HRCE, you know that Mario and Chris and myself do a lot of this PD. So we're always looking for ways to improve and things maybe you found beneficial and maybe things that I, maybe spent too much time on that wasn't overly beneficial. It's completely anonymous, so you can be as honest as you would like. But I do appreciate that honest feedback. So I posted that link in the chat, so you can do it now or you can do it in a few minutes. That's fine. And that's kind of it. So thanks so much for coming. I get really excited about organization. I wish I had more time to do it. Maybe I will at some point. But again, it kind of just takes taking a few minutes here and a few minutes there to sort of pick away at different things. And then eventually, as you go, if you make it a habit moving forward, you'll find that things start to look a little bit better. So my contact information is up there. Email me anytime, regardless of where you are at. It doesn't have to be just an HRCE. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to chat Google Drive organization with you. You can follow me on Twitter, or I've got an Instagram there that I really don't do much with, but it's in my plan to do a bit more. If you're in HRCE, feel free to sign up for our Tilt newsletter if you don't already. We send out lots of tips and tricks and grant opportunities, and who knows what September's going to look like. So when we figure that all out, maybe we'll send out some stuff that helps there. And then just a reminder as well that the slide deck is going to be posted in the shared file that Mario kind of explained how to access later. I'm sure there'll be lots of information on how to fill that out. And this presentation has also been recorded, which I will never watch myself because that would be super awkward. But if you are eventually watching this because it was pre-recorded, then thanks so much for sticking it out. You get a cookie, but it'll be posted. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to stick around and ask questions. I think we've got another 12 minutes or so. But if you're done and you're checking out, thanks so much for coming.